My name is Hart. I'm the statewide planning and program manager for the North Carolina Department of Transportation's Integrated Mobility Division. And one of the programs that I oversee is our intercity bus program. So throughout North Carolina, we subsidize 11 different routes, and we have two carriers. Seven are operated by Greyhound, and four are operated by Sunway Charters in North Carolina. We fund the program through 5311F state funds, and we utilize in-kind match for the 5311 funds through Greyhound's unsubsidized service. We're currently working on a new brand with consistent standards. Our ridership is increasing since COVID. I think we had about 160,000 riders last year on our system, and we're relocating stops that are more connected to the multimodal network. So some key objectives and goals of our program. We not only look at just ridership data, but we also look at connectivity to rural communities. North Carolina is a very unique state in the sense that we have some very major urban areas, but then we also have a lot of people in rural areas as well that aren't accessible. And 1 in 10 North Carolinians do not have access to a vehicle at all or most of the time. So, we're trying to make sure that we deliver on that underserved population that needs to access not only different parts of our state, but the national intercity bus network. So ridership data is not always our focus when we plan new routes and services. For example, Southern Pines is a community of about 15,000 people outside of Raleigh. And, we between the Raleigh and Southern Pines route, we have about one rider every single day. And so, for us, having one consistent rider at that stop every single day coming to and from Raleigh is pretty big for us. And it's not just about trying to get that number up to 20 or 30 riders a day. It's more about helping serve that one rider and making sure that we are connecting a more rural place to a major urban area, then can get them to other places. So we want to make sure that we make key connections to other major routes and services. So for example, getting those people from Southern Pines to Raleigh allows people to connect to all of our other different intercity bus routes, unsubsidized routes by Greyhound and FlixBus and Barron's Bus, as well as our Amtrak service and the airport. Here's a quick map of all of our subsidized services that we provide. Like I said, there are 11 routes, and we have pretty good coverage throughout the state, providing, all outreach into all the different very rural places. And we do have some stops, especially kind of in the eastern part of the state, that are very utilized, that are very rural in nature. So, our system may be a little more comprehensive than some other intercity bus systems in other states. But I guess, we're focusing more on that rural connectivity. And this map here shows some of our blue subsidized service overlaid with the red unsubsidized services from Greyhound, for example, and Barron's Bus. So, as we plan our subsidized routes, we want to think about the connectivity between all the different subsidized routes, but then we also have to plan for all the unsubsidized routes as well to make sure that those connections that go outside of the state are key, and we're not making passengers wait too terribly long to make those connections. So in terms of extra collaboration with other states and trying to get more people outside of North Carolina, not just looking inside North Carolina, we started talking about the Triad Danville connector. That was a short gap in our network right now that led up to Danville, Virginia. The Virginia Breeze, which is the Virginia Department of Public Transportation and Rail, that's their service that they pay for, that's operated by Megabus. They have two routes that pulse through Danville, Virginia. One of them is the Capital Connector, and the other one's the Piedmont Express. And that provides direct connectivity to DC, Charlottesville, and Richmond. So we wanted the people in our triad region to be able to access the Virginia services quicker, and then in turn access the national intercity bus network um, in a greater efficiency. Um, so between that, that low-hanging fruit of, the 60-mile connection to connect to two other major intercity bus routes, paired with some anecdotal feedback we received, as well as a study that Danville, Virginia had done, that found that their transit-dependent riders were looking to try to get into North Carolina, and vice versa, and back into Virginia. So there was like the regional need for this service, but then there's also the national intercity bus connectivity piece. Another key point to make here is that this was previously an unsubsidized route that Greyhound provided prior to 2018. So at one point, the ridership was well enough that Greyhound was able to prop it up on their own. And then after 2018, it became unprofitable and they removed that service. So it seemed like it was a good idea for us to kind of pick that up. And it also points to, trying to collaborate more with our neighbors and connect more across state borders. People don't stop at the border of North Carolina and Virginia and get off the bus. They want to keep going. I think a previous statistic was over 70% of intercity bus riders in North Carolina went across state lines. So, want to make sure that we get people greater connectivity to the north there. So talking a little bit about the collaboration we did with Virginia. First of all, North Carolina Department of Transportation initiated that conversation. We reached out to Virginia and talked about their stop and how they currently operated in Danville. We had to look at Danville, or the Virginia Breeze's on-time performance in Danville, their arrival and departure times and all that stuff, and making sure that we didn't impede on their schedule and connectivities. So that took months of planning and trying to look at different schedules and routes to make sure that everything was overlaid and we were able to adjust times on our network to make the connections that we needed to. So essentially what we came up with, we were able to create a pretty much a seamless transfer from all the way in Winston-Salem to Danville, which then would lead to those two routes. And there's like a 15-minute boarding or waiting time for those passengers. We worked to provide ticket sales. So we interlined the tickets, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So that passengers could purchase one ticket and have access to both buses, because a lot of passengers don't want to go through the process of having to identify the different routes that are available and then book two separate tickets. It's easier if the system kind of does that for them. And the system is not perfect, and we're still having to work out some kinks there that we have come across as we have launched the service. We had to establish operations and communications plans between both providers to ensure easy passenger transfer. For example, the Virginia Breeze route that comes down from DC into Richmond sometimes experiences delays on 95 in the afternoons from traffic. And so making sure that our bus doesn't leave Danville to head back into North Carolina before that bus arrives was very important. And then, of course, we had to do joint press releases and a communications and marketing rollout. And this process is kind of ongoing too, because we want to, since it is a new service, we want to make sure that people know that this connection exists. And I think that's something that, all transit agencies struggle with to some extent is, just making sure that their services and routes and things are marketed well to the public so people have the most up-to-date information and know where to go to find out those service changes. Here's a quick schedule of our Triad Danville connector route. As you can see, it starts in, let's see if I can move this really quick. So it starts in Winston-Salem at 5:10 in the morning and then heads to Danville. And then it arrives at 7:15 in Danville. And that at 7:30 is when the Virginia Breeze services depart Danville and head north into Richmond and DC and Charlottesville and DC, respectively. And then in the afternoon trip, when it comes back, those buses from Virginia come back to Danville around 7 o'clock. So then our buses leave Danville and head back into North Carolina at 7:15 p.m. So we wanted to make sure that we had a very quick window of time that we didn't have passengers waiting. Here's our brochure that we have. Just kind of want to talk briefly about connectivity to transit and other modes. This map may be difficult to see, but when we were thinking about our stop locations in different places, we really wanted to make sure that we were tying in and having as much connectivity as possible. Part of our goal at NCDOT as we kind of breathe life into the inner city bus program is making sure that we are focused on different areas where transit is located, making sure that they're in city centers or town centers to make sure that they're centrally located. Over the past 20 years, inner city bus has sometimes been pushed out to the periphery of the cities and towns, and then not so good gas stations and other locations that aren't accessible for our riders. So with these 4 locations, we want to make sure that we were located in the transit centers for each of these. So in Winston-Salem, we are connecting to a regional transit system as well as the local transit system at their main transit hub. In Greensboro, we are connecting to the local and regional transit system as well as Amtrak service. In Reidsville, we are connecting to the local transit center or the local transit at the Walmart, which is where all their routes pulse. And then in Danville, we're at their transit center and connect there from to their local transit as well as the Virginia Breeze. So making sure that we're in those downtown cores that are walkable and bikeable and accessible, and are connected to all the different transit routes that are available in those areas. As I mentioned, with interlining, we currently leverage the interlining process to make sure that we have one ticket. So our North Carolina service and the Virginia service is able to be booked on one ticket on the Megabus website. So when you enter in your start and stop destinations, that kind of does that for you for the rider, and they don't have to sit there and think and compare schedules and stuff. It just shows them they have one ticket that's scanned at both buses, and they get on. So there's some examples. If I were to go to Winston-Salem to Washington, DC, or go from Greensboro, North Carolina to Charlottesville, Virginia, you're just going to have one ticket. It does show that there's a transfer, but there's not any extra work needed on the rider side. So we want to make it as effortless as possible. But like I said, sometimes it is difficult to have all the different systems and things talk to each other. So when like for North Carolina, when we were working with 2 different carriers, Sunway Charters and Greyhound. Right now, Greyhound and Megabus aren't set up to interline their tickets, so we're having trying to work through those issues and make sure that people don't care who the carrier is or who is subsidizing the service. They just want that one ticket, want to know what their connectivity options are, and we want the site to show them all their different options. And then just some quick ridership numbers since we launched the service in January 15th of 2025. We started out with a few riders, and we have slowly trickled up over the past 3 months as word has gotten out that the service has existed. We would like to see this ridership, increase further. And I think with our marketing efforts and more coordination with the local communities, we will see these numbers continue to rise. And just want to kind of point out that, while ridership is important, is not our sole focus here on this. And we are trying to provide, the additional connectivity into the state of Virginia and and to kind of bolster the national intercity bus network. Um, so I think the key takeaways here, are making sure we coordinate with our neighboring states and our neighboring agencies to see how we can better integrate our service and make it easier for our riders. Because yeah, I don't think that any riders really care about which system they're on or state lines or urban lines and stuff. They just want to get from where they want to go to where they need to get to. And I think we should be more cognizant of that in our transit planning efforts. And this is my contact information if you have any questions. And I think that is it for me.
Okay, thanks, Hart. Couple questions for you. How does data you may have inform the intercity bus ridership goals and just operations objectives just in general?
Yeah, so about once a year we look at our ridership metrics, and it's really about budget too. If we have the budget to continue to maintain the service that we provide, even if we have, say, certain routes that aren't doing that ridership has fallen or not done as well as other routes, we may continue to keep them on the system just for that rural connectivity piece. And likewise, there probably are some stops that we don't really get much ridership on at all in these rural areas, but we do have 5 to 10 riders a month. And our bus is already going through there. So in our eyes, taking 10 minutes out of our schedule to then serve that stop at all times is kind of seen is more beneficial than cutting it and saving 10 minutes on the overall schedule. So I mean, we closely monitor ridership. If there's a stop that's not serving anybody for months on end, we're going to cut that service, and then looking at trying to make sure that if there's a ridership where we have increased ridership in certain areas, making sure that we have enough service to those different places. For instance, our Wilmington to Charlotte route is very popular, and we have to kind of monitor that to make sure that our timetables and stuff are helping serve the need there and get most people there in a timely manner. So in terms of ridership data, that's something we look at, but it's still definitely not something that we are just really keen on right now. But ridership does help subsidize our routes. The more riders we have, the cheaper our service is, and the less state and federal funds we have to use to fund the services. So that is definitely something we take into consideration.
Right. Okay, another question. Can you explain a bit more how the unsubsidized services are used in lieu of contributions?
Yeah, so that could be, I guess, a whole presentation probably.
Okay.
But essentially, um, like any intercity bus carrier, like Greyhound in our case, they provide trips that they as part of their profitable network, they do anyway. So for per FTA, we can then string together our subsidized route with their unsubsidized routes to make one giant route. And then we take the cost of what Greyhound pays to operate their unsubsidized route and we count that as local match. In a sense, it essentially doubles the cost of the um, the service that Greyhound is charging us, but then they only get reimbursed for half of it. So it's definitely an interesting topic, and I know that there are resources for that. And I think about 37 states now leverage in-kind match in some capacity, but there are still different states out there that are not utilizing the in-kind match because it is kind of like a black box to some people. But I definitely encourage anybody to reach out if they have want more information on in-kind match. But it is real, it works, it's fake money, but FTA allows us to do it. So I think it's a great tool to fund stuff that may not be funded otherwise, because we wouldn't be able to have the level of service we do in our state without in-kind match.
Yeah, and I'm assuming if there's a state out there that was interested in moving in that direction, I'm sure the FTA probably has a lot of resources that are would be available for them to take a look at and maybe ask some questions on how to do that. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, for sure. And I
Okay.
think, Greyhound is actually working with, I think it's Ashto right now, to kind of help identify which routes that they have that are unsubsidized that can be used as in-kind match throughout the country.
Okay.
So you'll be able to kind of check out and see, oh, like Greyhound is operating this route that is unsubsidized. If I can tie into this, I can leverage this route as in-kind match in my state. So it kind of would give the lay of the land there for that. But I think that's something that's coming up, in the next 6 to 8 months.
Right. Okay, one last question. So, how did Hurricane Helene affect any of your services and or in terms of when
Yes.
it happened? And I'm sure you may have. I know and I saw you had some services there in the western part of the state. So how did that all pan out, and where do
Correct.
you stand today?
So the service in the northern part of the state around the Boone, Wilkesboro, Lenore area, that was suspended temporarily for just a few days. And then service resumed once we had all the roads cleared and everything, because we are using, interstates and stuff like that. The Asheville situation is a little bit different of a story, because our stop there completely got destroyed, and the issue with I-40 being closed to traffic, it was decided by Greyhound. I guess according to this map, it shows that we subsidize a service all the way from Asheville to Franklin, but that's actually a connector bus, so that's not totally accurate. But our subsidized service stops in Asheville, and Greyhound picks up from there and does their profitable route into Tennessee. So it was Greyhound's choice to stop service into Tennessee temporarily. So we right now don't serve the western part of the state between Hickory, Newton, and Asheville, and Forest City and Asheville. We are working with the city of Asheville right now to restore service and get into their transit center since our stop was destroyed in Asheville. And it's been quite a process to kind of, restore that service and get those people back on the network. But yeah, the northern part of the state in the western part was pretty much unfazed, but as far as intercity bus travel goes. But our friends in Asheville and further west are still being impacted to this day because of it, because of the infrastructure challenges we had, and we're hoping to get the Asheville stop back online sometime in mid-June.
June. Okay.